My son's fiancé called me the help. My son called me embarrassing. And together they hatched a plan to take my life savings for their wedding and then uninvite me before I could walk through the door. I found out on a rainy Thursday night in Newark, staring at screenshots of a group chat titled The Margot Problem. They mocked my clothes, my smell, and the way I talked. They laughed about how desperate I was to be useful. But they forgot one thing. The help sees everything. And while they were planning to erase me, I was planning to make them famous. Trent sent me the screenshots at 11 p.m. on a rainy Thursday night in Newark, just 3 weeks after Peyton had uninvited me from the wedding. The vibration of the phone against my nightstand sounded like a warning shot, a sharp, buzzing drill against the cheap veneer. His message simply read, "Mrs. D, I'm so sorry, but you need to see this." I sat up in the darkness of my cramped apartment, the streetlights outside casting long prison bar shadows across my duvet. The air in the room was stale, smelling of the lavender cleaning spray. I couldn't wash off my skin, no matter how hard I scrubbed. I opened the attachments with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, and as the images loaded, my vision blurred. Not from tears, but from the visceral physical shock of a knife sliding between my ribs. It was a group chat titled The Margot Problem. The name alone took the air out of the room. The Margot Problem, not mom, not mother. I was a problem, a complication to be solved, like a stain on a rug or a leak in the roof. As I scrolled through messages dated from 2 months ago, the air left the room, leaving me gasping in the vacuum. Peyton, my son's fiancée, the woman I had welcomed and had tried so hard to please, had written, "We need her money first, then we uninvite her. If we do it before she closes the wallet, we have to be smart about this." I read it 3 times, trying to make the words mean something else, but they were clear, calculated, and cold. Then came the reply. Wyatt, my son, my beautiful boy, the boy whose fever I had cooled with wet rags, whose nightmares I had chased away, whose hand I had held through every fear, had replied, "Agreed. I'll cry about being broke, and she'll empty her savings. She always does. She's desperate to be useful. It's pathetic, honestly." Pathetic. The word echoed in my empty apartment. He didn't just see me as a resource. He saw me as pathetic. He mocked the very generosity he relied on. Then Peyton's mother, a woman I had only met once at a stiff brunch in Alpine, where she looked at my shoes like they were covered in manure, chimed in, "Smart thinking. Once she's invested, she won't cause problems. The help never does. They're used to being invisible." The help. And then the line that broke me. Wyatt followed up with, "God, I've been embarrassed by her my whole life. Her clothes, her smell, the way she talks. Finally, I get to be free of her." I stared at the date at the top of that conversation. February 10th. That was just 6 days before Wyatt showed up at my door in Newark. I remember that day vividly. He was shaking rain off his coat, holding expensive coffee and pastries from a bakery I could never afford. He had smiled that careful, fragile smile he used whenever he wanted something. 6 days after he wrote those mean words, he had sat on my sagging couch, calling me the best mother in the world. He had hugged me, told me he loved me, and professed his gratitude while secretly counting the days until he could erase me. In that moment, the realization hit me like a physical blow to the stomach, leaving me gasping for air. My son hadn't just drifted away, he had been planning a heist. And the target was me. My name is Margot Dunlap. I'm 62 years old, and I just discovered that my entire life had been a con. I sat there, staring at those screenshots while the sirens wailed outside my window, my phone screen flickering as I read the messages over and over. It felt like the words were swirling into shapes of cruelty that I couldn't quite grasp. Trent had sent me 15 screenshots, every single one capturing the architecture of their cruelty. Then came another message from Trent. "There's more," he said. "I've been keeping an eye on the groomsmen group chat, too. He's been telling everyone that you're unstable. He even said that if you show up at the wedding, they should call security to have you removed, that you might try to hurt Peyton. Mrs. D, he's setting you up. My blood ran cold. Hurt Peyton? I had never hurt a fly in my life. I had spent my days cleaning up other people's messes and making their lives beautiful. But as I looked at the dark corners of my apartment, I realized the danger wasn't just emotional anymore. It was legal. They were building a narrative and creating a paper trail to label me dangerous, unstable, a threat. If I showed up at that wedding to demand answers, I wouldn't just be turned away. I could be arrested and be put in a psychiatric hold. Wyatt wasn't just trying to uninvite me. He was trying to destroy my credibility so that if I ever spoke up, no one would believe me. I saved everything, backed it up to the cloud, and emailed it to myself. Next, I printed them out on my ancient printer, the mechanical whirring sound loud in the silence. A survival instinct I hadn't felt in 30 years was waking up inside me. That's when the memory of the ass came rushing back, twisted now into something sinister. It was 2 months ago. Wyatt never visited my Newark apartment. He acted like the poverty there was contagious. Instead, he insisted I come to Hoboken, but he always made me park in the public garage 3 blocks away so his neighbors wouldn't see my beat-up 2010 Honda sitting in his pristine driveway. But that day, he had come to me. "Mom, I'm between jobs right now," he had said, avoiding my gaze as he stirred sugar into his coffee and sitting on the edge of the couch as if afraid he might catch poverty from the cushions. "The wedding's getting really expensive. The Caldwells have all these expectations. The venue in Alpine, the flowers, the band. We're short about $50,000. I had said yes before he'd even finished the sentence. I hadn't thought about what it meant. I hadn't considered that $50,000 was every penny I'd saved over 40 years of scrubbing floors in Short Hills and skipping meals and telling myself that someday it would all be worth it. The next day, I went to the bank. The air conditioning was freezing and contrasting with the heat of my anxiety. The teller, a young woman named Sarah who knew how hard I worked for every deposit, looked at me with real concern as she counted out the cashier's check. Her hands hesitated over the paper, holding it back. "Miss Dunlap," she said softly, leaning closer to the glass. "This is a significant withdrawal. It's your entire life savings. The bank requires me to ask, is anyone forcing you to do this? Are you in any trouble?" She thought I was being scammed, and God help me, she was right. But I didn't know it then. "No, Sarah," I said, pride swelling in my chest, blinding me to the cliff I was walking off. "It's for my son's wedding. He's marrying a Caldwell. I'm investing in his future." She slowly slid the check across the marble counter. "If something happens, you have nothing left. No cushion, no emergency fund." "I have my son," I said. "He's my retirement plan." I drove to his luxury condo in Hoboken that afternoon, the check heavy in my purse. The building was a gleaming tower of glass and steel on the waterfront, overlooking the Manhattan skyline. When I arrived, the doorman made me wait in the lobby for 20 minutes while he confirmed I was allowed up. When I finally got to his floor, I heard music, laughter, and clinking glasses. Through the frosted glass of his door, I could see shapes moving. They were hosting a dinner party. I could see Peyton's wealthy friends scattered around their open-concept living room, sipping wine and nibbling on tiny plates of fancy appetizers. I raised my hand to knock, but the door opened before I could touch it. Wyatt slipped out into the hallway, closing the door firmly behind him and cutting off the warmth and the light. He looked over his shoulder as if I were a dirty secret he was trying to hide from the landlord. He didn't invite me in and didn't offer me a drink. "Did you get it?" he whispered, his eyes scanning the hallway. I reached into my purse and pulled out the check. "It's everything, Wyatt. Every penny." He took the check from me, his fingers brushing mine, and hugged me, but it was a stiff, performative hug, a hug you give a stranger. You're the best, Mom. I promise. You'll have a place of honor at the wedding. Front row. Can I come in? I asked, looking at the closed door. I'd love to say hello to Peyton. Panic flashed in his eyes. Not tonight. It's a work thing. Very boring. You wouldn't enjoy it. Honestly, Mom, you look tired. You should go home and rest. Then, before I could even take off my coat, he ushered me toward the service elevator, the one used for trash and deliveries. Use this one, he said. It's faster. I walked into the freight elevator, surrounded by padded walls and the smell of garbage, clutching my empty purse, and floated home on a cloud of belief that I had secured my place in his life. Little did I know I was paying for my own exit. The severance call came 3 weeks later, while I was on my knees scrubbing a marble floor in a mansion in Short Hills, ironically, just miles from where they planned to get married. My hands were raw from chemicals, my back ached from bending, and I was so tired I could barely stand. But I dried my hands on my jeans and answered the phone with a smile because the caller ID said it was Peyton. Margot? Hi. Do you have a minute? Her voice was crisp and professional, like a surgeon preparing to cut. Of course, sweetheart. I wanted to talk to you about the wedding. Wyatt and I have been discussing the guest list. My heart began racing, a primal warning signal flashing in my brain. The venue we've selected is very upscale. My family's friends and business associates will be there. It's important that everything reflects a certain standard. That pause felt like the air being sucked out of the room. I'm not sure how to say this delicately. There was no hesitation in her voice, only the cold precision of a woman who gets what she wants. Your presence at the wedding would be uncomfortable for everyone. I sat back on my heels, the smell of lemon polish choking me. I don't understand. Margot, you're a lovely woman, but you don't fit the aesthetic, your clothes, your mannerisms, your profession. Each word was a slap. It would be awkward. Wyatt would be embarrassed. Wyatt is my son, I whispered. I gave you $50,000. And we're grateful. Consider it your contribution to our future. A gift that doesn't require your physical presence. Does Wyatt know you're calling me? Wyatt agrees with this decision. He chose this. He chose this. The line went dead, and I was left alone in a stranger's mansion, surrounded by wealth I cleaned but couldn't touch, realizing my son had sold me for an aesthetic. I spent 3 days in a fugue state of grief. But grief eventually turns to anger, and anger demands answers. On the 4th day, I drove to Wyatt's condo in Hoboken. I needed to hear him say it, to see his eyes, and to know if the boy I raised was truly gone. Getting into the building was the first obstacle. The doorman, a man named Henry, who had seen me visit before, looked at my worn coat and blocked the entrance with his body. Mr. Porter isn't accepting visitors, he said, his hand resting near the phone. His eyes were hard. I'm his mother, I said, my voice shaking. I just need 5 minutes. He left specific instructions, ma'am. No unannounced guests, especially you. He said if you show up, I am to call the police immediately. Panic flared in my chest. He had put me on a banned list. He was criminalizing his own mother. I stepped back, pretending to leave, and walked around the corner with my heart hammering against my ribs. I waited in the shadows of the alleyway, watching the service entrance. 10 minutes later, a delivery guy with a stack of pizzas buzzed in. As the heavy steel door swung open, I slipped my foot in the gap before it could close. The metal bit into my ankle, but I didn't cry out. I slid through, ignoring the delivery guy's shout of, "Hey, you can't go up there." I ran for the freight elevator, hitting the button frantically, terrified the security guards would drag me out before I got answers. The elevator smelled of garbage and wet cardboard. I rode it to the 14th floor, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I found his door, Unit 14B. I pounded on it. "Wyatt, open this door." It opened, but only a crack. The chain was still on. Wyatt peered out, wearing silk loungewear and looking terrified. "Mom, what are you doing here?" You can't be here, he hissed, glancing back into the apartment. You took my money and you uninvited me? I pushed against the door, feeling the chain strain against the wood. Tell me it's a lie, Wyatt. Tell me Peyton did this without you. Peyton appeared behind him, holding a glass of wine. She didn't look scared. She looked bored. I told you she'd come. Call security, Wyatt. Tell them there's an intruder. Wyatt, please, I begged, reaching my hand through the crack, trying to touch his arm. I worked 3 jobs for you. I scrubbed floors. I gave you everything. He flinched away from my touch, as if I were contagious. Mom, stop. You're making a scene. This is exactly why you can't come. You're unstable. Unstable? I'm your mother. You're a liability, he shouted, the mask finally slipping. Look at you. You look like the help. I'm finally somebody, Mom. I finally made it. I can't have you dragging me back down to Newark. Suddenly, the elevator dinged. There she is, he pointed. 2 uniformed security guards appeared in the hallway, their radios crackling. They were big men, holding batons. Ma'am, step away from the door, one of them barked, reaching for my arm. Don't touch me, I screamed, pulling away. Wyatt slammed the door shut. I heard the lock click and the deadbolt slide home. The guard grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. You need to come with us, ma'am, or we call NYPD. I let them escort me out, humiliated, crying, and dragged past the neighbors who peered out of their peepholes. I was thrown out onto the sidewalk in Hoboken like trash. I drove back to Newark in the rain, the windshield wipers unable to keep up with the deluge, realizing that the Trent screenshots weren't just gossip. They were a warning. My son hadn't just uninvited me. He had declared war upon me. And I had absolutely no idea how I was going to survive it. To understand how a sensible 62-year-old woman ends up being escorted out of her son's building by security, you have to understand the ghosts we were living with long before I ever stepped foot into that high-rise. I raised Wyatt alone. His father left when he was 3, disappearing into the wind and leaving nothing behind but debt. I was 23, terrified, and determined that my son would never feel the lack of a father or the lack of money, and so I had turned myself into a machine for his sake. But that night, leaving his luxury condo with security guards watching me go, the machine finally broke. I drove home to Newark in a daze, barely seeing the rain-slicked asphalt of the New Jersey Turnpike. Back in my apartment, the silence was deafening. I found myself standing in front of my bedroom closet, staring at the plastic storage bin I'd kept for 28 years, the one filled with Wyatt's childhood. I pulled out a Mother's Day card he'd made in 2nd grade. You are my sunshine. I love you forever. The boy who wrote that card was gone. I dug deeper, past the report cards, and my hand closed around a small velvet jewelry box. It was empty now, but I kept it as a reminder of the day I realized my son's ambition was going to cost me everything. It was the year Wyatt turned 12. He had come home from school sullen and quiet. The wealthy kids in his magnet school, the school I had fought the district to get him into, were all taking private piano lessons. Wyatt, with his thrift store sneakers and his latchkey life, felt small. I want to play, he had whispered, looking at his hands. I have the hands for it, Mom. The teacher said I have the reach of a virtuoso. I didn't have the money. I was already working double shifts. But I looked at his face, the desperation to belong, and I made a choice. The next day, I took the only thing of value I owned, my grandmother's diamond engagement ring. It was my safety net, my emergency fund. I walked into a pawn shop on Broad Street. The broker, a man with yellow eyes and nicotine-stained fingers, sneered at it. $300, he said. It's worth $1,000, I pleaded. Please, it's for my son. $300, take it or leave it. I took it. I sold my history for his future. That money paid for 6 months of lessons on a beat-up upright piano I found on Craigslist. I remember the nights I sat in the kitchen, listening to him practice scales, while I soaked my blistered feet in a bucket of ice water. The music was beautiful, but every note sounded like the absence of that ring on my finger. 6 months later, he stopped practicing and said the piano was boring. When I begged him to continue, reminding him of the cost, he rolled his eyes and said, "I didn't ask you to sell your ring, Mom. You take everything so seriously." I put the empty velvet box back in the bin. That was the pattern. I cut off pieces of myself to build bridges for him, and he burned them as soon as he crossed. But the emotional sacrifices paled in comparison to the physical ones. To pay for his tuition at that private high school, I had taken a third job. I picked up the overnight cleaning contract for a corporate office building in Jersey City. 2 nights a week, I would leave the diner at 11 p.m., drive to the office park, and clock in at midnight. While Wyatt slept, I was on my hands and knees scrubbing industrial toilets and vacuuming endless miles of gray carpet in a skyscraper that swayed in the wind. But there was one night during that cleaning job that I never told a soul about. A night that proved exactly what my life was worth compared to his. It was 3 a.m. on a payday Friday. I had just finished my shift and was walking to my car in the desolate industrial park in Jersey City. In my purse was $600 in cash, my wages plus tips I had hoarded from the diner. That money was already earmarked for Wyatt's semester book fees. I heard the footsteps behind me before I saw him. I quickened my pace, clutching my purse to my chest, but the footsteps sped up. A hand grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around with enough force to snap my neck. A man in a dark hoodie shoved me against the brick wall of the building. I smelled stale alcohol and rot. He pressed a knife, a jagged, rusty thing against my throat. "Drop the bag," he hissed. "Drop it and walk away." Any sane person would have dropped it. $600 isn't worth dying for. But in that split second, I didn't see $600. I saw Wyatt's textbooks. I saw his chemistry lab fees, and I saw the only thing standing between him and expulsion. "No," I whispered. The man's eyes widened. He hadn't expected the gray-haired cleaning lady to fight. He lunged for the strap. I didn't let go. I kicked him, screaming and clawing at his face with nails broken from scrubbing floors. He struck me across the face, the blow rattling my teeth, splitting my lip open. I tasted copper and felt the warm slide of blood down my chin, but I tightened my grip on that bag like it was my own child. "You're crazy," he shouted, shoving me hard onto the wet pavement. The fall knocked the wind out of me, but I curled into a ball around my purse, sobbing, waiting for the knife. But he ran. Maybe he thought I wasn't worth the trouble. Or maybe he saw headlights approaching. I lay there on the asphalt for 10 minutes, bleeding, shaking, and clutching $600 of dirty bills. I drove home with one eye swollen shut. When Wyatt asked about my face the next morning, I told him I had walked into a cabinet door in the dark. He believed me because he didn't look close enough to see the bruises were shaped like knuckles. I had taken this beating for his books. And 10 years later, he would tell his friends I was unstable. But the mugging wasn't the only time I bled for that tuition check. 2 months later, I was cleaning a chandelier in the foyer of a massive estate in Alpine. It was a rush job. The owners were hosting a gala that night and offered triple pay if I could get the crystals sparkling by 5 p.m. Wyatt needed a deposit for a study abroad program in London, and I was short $800. I was 20 feet up on an aluminum extension ladder, stretching to reach the top tier of crystals with a microfiber cloth. My legs were shaking from fatigue. I hadn't eaten since breakfast the day before to save grocery money. I overreached. The ladder slipped on the polished marble floor. I didn't scream. I didn't have time. I fell 20 feet, crashing down onto the unforgiving stone. I instinctively threw my left arm out to break the fall. The sound was sickening, a wet, loud snap that echoed in the empty mansion like a gunshot. I lay on the cold marble, white spots dancing in my vision, trying not to vomit from the pain. When I looked at my left wrist, it was bent at an angle that wasn't human. The bone was pressing against the skin, threatening to tear through. Any normal person would have called 911. Any normal person would have worried about nerve damage or surgery. But I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 3:30 p.m. If I left now, I wouldn't get the triple pay. I wouldn't get the $800. Wyatt wouldn't get to London. So I stood up, went to the kitchen, found a bag of frozen peas and a roll of duct tape, and shoved the peas against my wrist, wrapped it so tight my fingers turned purple, and swallowed 4 Tylenol dry. Then I climbed back up the ladder. I cleaned the rest of that chandelier one-handed, dragging the ladder across the floor with my hip, biting my lip until it bled to keep from passing out. When the owner came home at 5 p.m., she inspected the crystals, handed me the cash, and complained that I looked a little pale. I drove myself to the ER only after I had deposited the cash into Wyatt's account and told the doctors I had slipped on ice. I have a metal pin in my wrist to this day, a permanent souvenir of my son's semester in Europe. He sent me one postcard from London. It said, "Having a blast. Send more cash if you can." There was another kind of suffering too, the hunger. I remember one night in particular. Wyatt was 14. He was going through a growth spurt, eating everything in sight. I had cooked a pot roast, a small one, the best cut I could afford. I served it to him, watching him devour it. "Aren't you eating, Mom?" he asked, his mouth full. My stomach twisted with a hunger pang so sharp it felt like a cramp. I hadn't eaten since breakfast the day before. "I ate at work," I lied, smiling. "They had a buffet. I'm stuffed." I sat there, drinking a glass of water to fill the void and watching my son eat the food I had denied myself. I watched him grow strong on my starvation. The breaking point, or what should have been the breaking point, came during his second year of business school. Wyatt told me he was hosting a study group for his high net worth classmates. He needed the apartment to look perfect, and he needed food. For 2 days, I scrubbed our Newark apartment until my fingers bled, hiding my cheap knickknacks, trying to make our poverty look bohemian. I spent my grocery budget on expensive cuts of beef and wine I couldn't pronounce. When his friends arrived, laughing, wearing cashmere, and smelling of money, I walked out of the bedroom in my best dress, ready to play the hostess and ready to be his mother. Wyatt intercepted me in the hallway. His face went tight. "Mom, what are you doing?" he whispered, grabbing my elbow. "I'm coming to say hello," I smiled. "I made the beef bourguignon." He steered me physically into the kitchen and closed the door. "No, you stay in here. These people, they come from a different world. If you go out there and start talking about your cleaning jobs or your coupons, you'll humiliate me. Just handle the food, like a caterer." He turned and walked out, leaving me alone with the dirty pots. I spent the next 3 hours in that hot, airless kitchen, plating food for boys who would never know my name. I listened to their laughter through the thin door and ate the scraps standing over the sink like a rat. When they finally left, Wyatt came in, flushed with wine and success. "Great food, Mom," he said, tossing his napkin on the counter. "We really impressed them." "I am not your caterer, Wyatt," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I am your mother. I paid for that wine." He looked at me with a chilling, detached pity. "You're the logistics mom. Don't try to be the talent. It doesn't suit you." I should have stopped paying then, but I didn't. I told myself he was just ambitious, that the business world was cruel, and he was just adapting. But the final blow came at graduation. I had requested the day off work months in advance. I had bought a new dress and was ready to watch him walk across that stage and accept the MBA that had cost me $215,000. 2 days before the ceremony, Wyatt came home with a somber face. "Mom, I have bad news," he said. "The school limited the tickets this year. They only gave us 2, and, well, I invited the partners from the firm I'm interning with. It's a career move. You understand, right? It's for my future." He looked so sad, so regretful. I hugged him and told him I understood and that I would watch the live stream. I sat in my apartment alone, watching the grainy video on my laptop as he walked across the stage. It wasn't until a week later, when I saw photos on Facebook, that I realized the truth. The auditorium wasn't even full. Students had 4, 5, 6 guests, and sitting in the front row, cheering for Wyatt, were the Caldwells, Peyton's wealthy parents. He hadn't given the tickets to his bosses. He had given them to the family he wanted and erased the mother he had. Then came the drift. It wasn't a sudden break. It was a slow, agonizing fade. Wyatt landed a prestigious job at a top-tier marketing firm in the city, and his salary jumped. He moved into that gleaming glass-walled condo in Hoboken that looked over the Hudson River and bought a slate gray BMW that he parked carefully away from our rusting Honda sedan whenever he deigned to visit, which became rarer and rarer. I was the scaffolding he had used to build his tower, and now that the building was finished, the scaffolding was just an eyesore that needed to be taken down. I didn't realize that while I was mourning the distance, Wyatt was actively replacing me. The realization snapped me back to the present, sitting on the floor of my Newark apartment surrounded by the ghosts of his childhood. The grief that had paralyzed me for days finally burned off, leaving something colder and sharper in its place. I opened my laptop, and instead of crying, I started working. I typed Caldwell Estate Alpine NJ Wedding into the search bar. Within an hour, I knew everything. The venue was the private Caldwell Estate, a sprawling mansion in Alpine, and the date was April 12th. I found Peyton's social media next. There were photos of her with Wyatt at country clubs in Bedminster. One caption stopped me cold. Posted 3 days ago, so grateful for fresh starts and leaving old baggage behind. Hashtag blessed life, hashtag new beginnings. Old baggage. That's what I was to them. I went looking through old files on my computer, searching for a digital backup I had made years ago when Wyatt was applying to colleges. I found a folder labeled Wyatt College Apps. Inside was a document titled Admission Essay, Final. He had never let me read it. Now I opened it. The title was Growing Up Poor, How Poverty Shaped My Ambition. The first paragraph made me feel physically sick. I grew up in a small, suffocating apartment in Newark, New Jersey. My mother cleaned houses for a living. She still does. We never had money. My childhood was defined by the smell of other people's trash and the shame of what I didn't have. But it was the conclusion that made me put the laptop down and walk away before I threw it across the room. Watching my mother work 3 jobs taught me that hard work isn't always enough. It taught me that dignity is something you buy. But it also taught me something else, that I would never be like her. I will use this education as a ladder to escape the small, sad life she built, and I will honor her sacrifice by becoming someone she could never be. Successful. I would never be like her. My son had built his future by promising a college admissions committee that he'd escape me. He had sold my struggle as his origin story, but he had stripped out all the love and left only the shame. He had been planning to erase me since he was 18 years old. I reached for my phone, but before I could dial, it rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Is this Margot Dunlap?" A woman's voice asked. It was sharp and authoritative. "Yes," I replied, my heart starting to race again. "My name is Detective Jasmine Stone with the Newark Police Department. I'm reaching out because a harassment complaint was filed against you this morning by Wyatt Porter and Peyton Caldwell." The room started spinning. "Harassment?" "They claim you've been stalking them," the detective said, her voice devoid of warmth. "Showing up at their home uninvited, sending threatening messages, and refusing to accept their boundaries. Miss Dunlap, given the Caldwell family's standing, this is being taken very seriously." I closed my eyes, the phone pressed against my ear. They weren't just erasing me, they were also criminalizing me. "I understand," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'll come down to the station." I drove to the Newark Police Department with my evidence folder on the passenger seat, my hands shaking so violently on the steering wheel that I had to grip it until my knuckles turned white. Detective Jasmine Stone met me in an interview room. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes. "Sit down, Miss Dunlap," she said. "The complaint filed by Mr. Porter is extensive. They are seeking a temporary restraining order." "They are trying to paint me as unstable," I said, opening my folder, "because if I'm unstable, then I'm not a victim. If I'm crazy, then they don't have to pay me back." I laid the documents out on the table, the bank statements, the screenshots Trent had sent me, and the photos of Wyatt's childhood. Detective Stone picked up the screenshot of the group chat, the one where Peyton wrote, "We need her money first, then we uninvite her." She read it once, then she read it again. Her expression shifted from professional detachment to disgust. This is premeditated," she murmured. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping. "If you fight this in the shadows, you will lose. They have the money to outlast you. You need to take this out of the dark. Call Corinne Hayes. She's an investigative journalist for the Star-Ledger. She specializes in elder financial abuse." I took the card and walked out of the station. The rain had stopped, leaving the Newark streets slick and black. I reached my car, fumbling for my keys, and that's when I noticed it. A long, black Lincoln Continental was idling 3 spots down. It was immaculate, chrome gleaming under the streetlights, looking completely out of place in a lot full of rust and dents. It looked less like a car and more like a hearse waiting for a passenger. The back window rolled down with an electric hum. "Mrs. Dunlap?" The voice came from inside, smooth, deep, and menacingly polite. I didn't answer. I jammed my key into the lock, my heart hammering. A man stepped out from the back seat. He wasn't wearing tactical gear. He was wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than my entire wardrobe. And he had the dead, bored eyes of a man who cleaned up messes for the 1%. "Who are you?" I asked, backing up until my spine hit the driver's side door. "I work for the Caldwell family," he said, closing the heavy car door with a solid, expensive thud and taking a step toward me. He moved with the casual confidence of a predator. "Mr. Caldwell is very concerned about your mental state. He thinks you need rest, and he's willing to pay for a very nice facility. Somewhere quiet where you can't hurt yourself or anyone else." The implication was clear. They weren't just going to sue me. They were threatening to have me committed, to lock me away so the wedding could proceed. "Stay away from me," I hissed, raising the pepper spray on my keychain. The man smiled, a thin, humorless stretching of lips. "Think about it, Margot. $50,000 is gone. But your freedom? You still have that. For now. Don't make us come back." He got back into the Lincoln Continental. The tires screeched as he peeled out of the lot, cutting close enough to my legs that I felt the wind of the vehicle. He had tried to scare me and to break me. But he had made a mistake. That was the moment the fear evaporated, burned away by a white-hot rage. I got into my car, locked the doors, and dialed the number Detective Stone had given me. Corinne Hayes answered on the second ring. "My name is Margot Dunlap," I said. "My son stole my life savings, uninvited me from his wedding, and just sent a man to threaten me in a police parking lot. I want to burn their reputation to the ground." Corinne didn't waste time. "Meet me at the diner on Broad Street in 40 minutes, she said. "And bring everything. If we're going to do this, we launch before they say I do." I sat across from her in a vinyl booth while the rain hammered against the diner windows. Corinne was a force of nature, a journalist with messy hair and a mind like a steel trap. She verified the texts, called the bank to confirm the transfer, and even interviewed Geneva, my supervisor from the cleaning service, and Lorraine, a waitress I'd worked with at the diner for 10 years, over the phone right there at the table, getting on-record statements about the sacrifices I had made for Wyatt. She drafted the article in 48 hours. It wasn't just a sob story. It was a forensic dismantling of their reputation. The article went live on NJ.com at 8 a.m. on the Tuesday before the wedding. We titled it, "The Mother Erased: How the Elite Caldwell Family and an Aspiring Groom Exploited a Newark Cleaner for a $50,000 Wedding." I sat in my apartment, staring at the laptop screen and hitting refresh with trembling fingers. I was terrified. I was exposing my own humiliation to the world. I was admitting that I had raised a son who hated me and a son who viewed me as a stain to be scrubbed out. But then the numbers started to climb. 500 shares, 2,000 shares, 10,000 shares. By noon, it was trending on Twitter. By 2 p.m., the New York Post had picked it up with a headline that screamed, "Groomzilla Uncanceled." By 4 p.m., television vans were parked outside the wrought iron gates of the Caldwell estate in Alpine, trying to get a comment from the family who had tried to silence a cleaning lady. The comment section was a tidal wave of outrage. Strangers from across the country were dissecting Wyatt's cruelty. They weren't just angry. They were vindictive on my behalf. My phone started ringing immediately. Reporters, lawyers, random numbers. I silenced the ringer, flipping the phone face down, and ignored them all. I was waiting for one call. One specific call. It came at exactly 11:45 p.m. The caller ID showed Wyatt. I stared at the name of the boy I had carried, the boy I had starved for, the boy who had sent a fixer to threaten me in a parking lot. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but I needed to hear it. I needed to hear the voice of the man who thought he could erase me. I answered, saying nothing. "You destroyed me?" he screamed, his voice cracking with a hysteria I had never heard before. He sounded drunk or terrified, or both. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Peyton's father is threatening to sue me. The groomsmen are dropping out. The caterer just canceled because they don't want the bad press." "I told the truth, Wyatt," I said, my voice calm, the anchor in his storm. "You humiliated me. You made me look like a monster." "I didn't make you look like anything. I just showed the world the screenshots you wrote. If that makes you a monster, that's on you. I'm your son," he sobbed, the anger collapsing into pathetic self-pity. "How could you do this to your own son?" "You stopped being my son when you filed a police report against me," I said, the words tasting like ash. "You stopped being my son when you sent a man to threaten me in a parking lot. You wanted to be a Caldwell Wyatt? Well, now you're famous, just like them. Mom, please, you have to retract it. Tell them you lied. Tell them you're confused. Peyton says if you don't fix this, the wedding is off, and she'll leave me." "Then let her leave," I said. "I can't. I gave up everything for this. I gave you up." "Yes," I said softly. "You did, and now you're learning the price." I hung up the phone, turned it off completely, and unplugged the landline. The remaining 3 days leading up to the wedding were a masterclass in chaos. I closed my blinds against the news vans that had started circling my block in Newark like sharks sensing blood in the water. Corinne told me to stay inside, but I didn't need to see the news to know what was happening. I could feel it in the air. Wyatt didn't dare show his face in Newark. He knew better. He was too busy trying to bail water out of a sinking ship. The wedding day dawned gray and humid, the kind of April day in New Jersey that feels heavy, like a wet wool blanket. I woke up at 6 a.m., made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. I wasn't going to the wedding. I wasn't going to stand outside the gates of the Caldwell estate in Alpine like a beggar. I had something better. I had a spy. Trent, Wyatt's best friend and groomsman, the boy who had eaten my lasagna every Friday night for 10 years, had promised to be my eyes. He texted me at 7 a.m. "I'm heading to Alpine. It's a circus, Mrs. D. There are news vans parked at the bottom of the driveway. Security is checking IDs like we're entering the Pentagon. The Caldwells look like they're going to a funeral." I watched the day unfold through his messages, each one a vivid snapshot of the disaster I had orchestrated simply by telling the truth. At 10 a.m., he wrote, "The ceremony is supposed to start at noon. The ballroom is set for 250 people. Maybe 80 are here. Entire tables are empty. The caterers are removing place settings to try and hide the gaps, but it looks pathetic." 11:30 a.m. Peyton's father is screaming at the wedding planner in the lobby. He's threatening to sue the security company because a reporter got onto the lawn. Wyatt is hiding in the groom's suite. He looks like a ghost. He keeps asking if anyone has seen his phone. I think Peyton took it away, so he can't see the comments. I sip my coffee as I read through, the bitterness grounding me. They had wanted an aesthetic wedding. They had wanted a day free of the embarrassment of a cleaning lady. Instead, they got a PR nightmare. 12 p.m., the ceremony is starting late. The vibe is awful. No one is talking. Everyone is on their phones reading the article. I can hear them whispering, "Did you see the text? Did you see what he called her?" They aren't looking at the altar, Mrs. D. They're looking at Wyatt like he's a specimen in a jar. I closed my eyes and pictured it, the Caldwell estate in Alpine. A sprawling monstrosity of stone and glass that I had once cleaned for a party agency years ago. I imagined the crystal chandeliers, the imported flowers, and the orchestra playing to a room full of people who were only staying for the spectacle. 1 p.m. They did it. They're married, but when the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," there was no applause, just dead silence. A few polite claps from the front row, but the rest of the room was stone cold. Peyton looks furious. She's smiling, but her eyes are dead. She won't look at Wyatt. Then the update suddenly stopped. For 3 hours, there was silence. I paced my small apartment, anxiety gnawing at me. Had Trent been caught? Had Wyatt realized his best friend was the leak? The sun began to set over Newark, casting long shadows across my floor. Finally, at 4:30 p.m., my laptop pinged. Sorry, it got ugly. I couldn't text. My heart hammered. What happened? The reception, it was a bloodbath. Peyton's mother, Mrs. Caldwell, got drunk, fast. She cornered Wyatt near the bar. She didn't whisper. She screamed and told him he had ruined the family name. She called him a fraud. She said, "We invited a grifter into our house, and now the whole world knows we're idiots." I read the words, feeling a phantom ache for the boy Wyatt used to be, the boy who would cry if he hurt someone's feelings. But that boy was gone. Wyatt tried to argue back, Trent continued. He tried to blame you, said you were crazy, and that you manipulated the journalist. But then someone played the video. What video? I typed, my fingers trembling. Someone found a video from your Facebook, from Wyatt's 10th birthday, the one where he's blowing out candles on that lopsided chocolate cake you made, and he looks at the camera and says, "My mom is the best mom in the world." It was circulating among the guests. The contrast, Mrs. D, the contrast between that sweet kid and the man standing there in a $5,000 tuxedo blaming his mother, it broke the room. People just started walking out. The visual hit me hard. My Facebook. The archives I had forgotten were public. The evidence of love was the weapon that finally destroyed his lie. And then, Trent wrote, Peyton snapped. I leaned closer to the screen. She threw her ring at him in the middle of the ballroom and screamed that he was a liar, that he had sold her a fake version of himself. She said, "I married a self-made man, not a charity case who abused his mother to get ahead." Then she walked out and her parents followed her. The music stopped and the staff started clearing the tables while Wyatt just stood there in the middle of the dance floor, completely alone. I sat back in my chair, the air leaving my lungs in a long, shuddering exhale. It was done. They had uninvited me to save their image. And in doing so, they had destroyed it completely. The wedding didn't survive the night. Trent sent one last message at 6 p.m. I'm leaving. Wyatt is sitting on the steps of the estate waiting for an Uber because the Caldwells kicked him out. He has nowhere to go. He asked if he could crash on my couch. I waited, the cursor blinking. What did you say? I typed. I told him I didn't have room for people who treat their mothers like trash. I left him there. I closed the laptop. I walked to the window and looked out at the gritty street below. The rain had started again, washing the grime off the sidewalk. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. But mostly, I just felt a profound, exhausting sadness. I had won the war, but I had lost my son. The boy I raised was dead, killed by his own ambition. The man sitting on the curb in Alpine in the rain was a stranger. But the war wasn't over yet. The public court of opinion had ruled, but the legal system was just getting started. The aftermath of the wedding that never happened didn't arrive in a wave. It arrived like a tsunami, reshaping the entire landscape of my life in a matter of days. It started with a notification on my phone, a distinct ping I hadn't heard before because I had never installed the app. Corinne, the journalist, had texted me a link with a simple message. Look at this. Breathe. I clicked the link. It was a GoFundMe page titled Restoring Margot's Dignity. Help a Mother Betrayed. I hadn't started it. A woman in Ohio, a complete stranger who had read the article and recognized her own story in mine, had set it up. The goal was $50,000, just enough to replace what Wyatt had stolen. I stared at the screen, my hand flying to my mouth. Amount already raised, $143,000 in 5 days. I sat at my kitchen table in Newark, weeping until my chest ached. It wasn't just the money, though the money meant I wouldn't have to scrub toilets until I was 80. It was the comments. Thousands of them. Strangers from Texas, from London, from down the street in Jersey City, all validating the pain I had been told was imaginary. For the piano lessons you sold your ring for the nights you slept in your car, for every mother who was told she was an embarrassment. I transferred the funds with shaking hands. For the first time in 28 years, my bank account didn't mock me. It protected me. And I needed that protection because the legal war was just beginning. The next morning, a lawyer named Linda Keller called. She was a shark from a top-tier firm in Manhattan who specialized in elder financial abuse. She had read the article and she had seen the screenshots. Miss Dunlap, she said, her voice crisp and eager. I don't just want to help you get your $50,000 back. I want to help you set a precedent. What your son did isn't just cruel. Under New Jersey law, it is financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. We are going to sue him for everything he has, everything he took, and everything he tried to destroy. I don't have money for a retainer, I said automatically, the reflex of a lifetime of poverty. You don't need money, Linda said. I'm taking this pro bono because I have a mother too. And if I ever did this to her, I would expect her to burn my life to the ground. I looked at the empty velvet box in my closet, looked at the scar on my forehead from the car accident on the turnpike, and looked at the bank statement with the zero balance. Okay, I said, let's burn it down. Linda filed the lawsuit in the Superior Court of New Jersey 2 weeks later. The filing didn't mince words. It accused Wyatt Porter of elder financial exploitation, fraudulent inducement, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. These weren't just civil complaints. They were accusations that carried the stench of criminal conduct. Wyatt's lawyer, a different one this time, because the first one had likely quit when the checks stopped clearing, tried to settle immediately. They sent a panicked email offering to return the $50,000 if I would drop the case and sign a draconian non-disclosure agreement, promising never to speak about the Caldwells or Wyatt again. Linda read the offer to me over the phone, her voice dripping with disdain. They want to buy your silence, Margot. They want to scrub the internet and pretend this never happened. I looked around my apartment and at the patch of mold on the ceiling I had stared at for 10 years. No, I told her. I don't want silence. I want a verdict. I want it on the public record that he exploited me. It will be a fight, she warned. I've been fighting for 28 years, I said. I'm ready. While we prepared for court, Wyatt's life unraveled with a speed and violence that was terrifying to watch. It was a demolition. First came the annulment. Peyton filed 6 weeks after the disastrous reception. She didn't file for divorce, she filed for annulment based on fraud. Her legal filing claimed that Wyatt had materially misrepresented his background, financial standing, and character. In the eyes of the law, she was arguing that the man she married didn't exist. And she was right. Then came the disavowal. The Caldwell family released a brief and brutal statement to the press. We were deceived by Mr. Says Porter regarding his treatment of his family. We do not associate with individuals who exploit vulnerable elders. We wish him the best in his future endeavors. It was a corporate execution. Then came the job. His company in Hoboken, a boutique marketing firm that prided itself on family values, fired him. They cited the morals clause in his contract. No one wanted a client rep whose face was synonymous with elder abuse. And finally, the condo. Without Peyton's family subsidizing the lifestyle and without a job, Wyatt couldn't afford the luxury high-rise in Hoboken. He was evicted 3 months after the wedding. He had sacrificed his mother to secure his place in the elite world. Now the elite world had chewed him up and spit him out, and he had no mother to catch him. And somehow, impossibly, he still blamed me for all of it. We settled the lawsuit 3 months later. Linda backed them into a corner so tight they couldn't breathe. Wyatt agreed to repay the full $50,000 plus $30,000 in damages and legal fees, to be paid over 5 years in monthly installments, garnished from whatever future wages he managed to earn. The judgment was entered into the public record. It was done. I used the GoFundMe money to move. I left the cramped apartment in Newark with its bad memories and intruder anxiety and rented a bright, clean 2-bedroom condo in a quiet suburb called Montclair. It had big windows, a washer-dryer in the unit, and a security system. It was the first time in my life I had lived somewhere that felt safe. That was where he found me. It was a Tuesday evening in late September. I was watering the basil plants on my new balcony when the buzzer rang. I checked the camera feed, a habit born of trauma. A man was standing at the building's front door. He looked like a vagrant. His hair was unwashed and grown out. His clothes hung loosely on a frame that had lost 20 pounds, and his eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. It took me 10 seconds to realize it was my son. I hesitated. My finger hovered over the intercom. The old Margot, the mother who had sold her ring for piano lessons, would have buzzed him in instantly. She would have made him soup and told him it wasn't his fault. But that Margot had died on the side of the New Jersey Turnpike in a wrecked car. I buzzed him in, but I met him at my apartment door. I didn't unlock the screen. "Mom," he rasped as he climbed the stairs. When he saw me, he stopped. He looked at my clean clothes, my calm face, the safe and warm glow of the apartment behind me. He looked at the dignity I had bought for myself. "Mom, please," he said, his voice cracking. "I need to talk to you." I unlocked the main door, but blocked the entrance with my body. "You have 5 minutes, Wyatt." He stepped into the entryway, bringing the smell of rain and desperation with him. He looked around the apartment, his eyes widening. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that I hadn't just survived his attempt to destroy me. I had thrived. "I'm sorry," he said, and the tears started instantly. "I was wrong, so incredibly wrong. I got lost, Mom. I was trying to fit into Peyton's world, and I let them twist me. I hurt you, and I'm sorry." I stood with my arms crossed, leaning against the doorframe, feeling a strange calmness settling over me. I waited for the but. "Peyton left me," he sobbed, the words spilling out like vomit. "She annulled the marriage. Her family is suing me for the wedding costs. I lost my job. I lost the condo. I'm sleeping on a friend's couch in Jersey City, but he wants me out by Friday. Mom, I have nothing. Nothing." He looked at me with those desperate, wet eyes, the same eyes he had used when he wanted the piano lessons, when he wanted the tuition, and when he wanted the car. "I'm sorry that happened to you," I said quietly. And I meant it. It is a terrible thing to watch your child burn down their own life. "I'm not asking for money," he said, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "I just need my mom back. I need a place to stay just until I get back on my feet. You need what's convenient," I interrupted, my voice steady and hard as granite. "When you needed my money for the wedding, I was useful. When Peyton's family demanded you erase me to fit their aesthetic, I was disposable. Now that you've lost everything and have nowhere to sleep, you need me again. That's not love, Wyatt. That's parasitism." "I love you. I do. I made a terrible mistake." "You made a choice," I said, my voice rising just enough to silence him. "You chose status over me. You chose a woman who called me baggage over the woman who scrubbed floors to feed you. You chose to file a police report against me to protect your lie." I took a breath, letting the finality of it settle in the air between us. "You broke something that can't be fixed with an apology, Wyatt. You didn't just break my heart. You broke the contract of motherhood. I held up my end for 28 years. You burned yours." "So what? You're just going to abandon me?" he screamed, the anger flashing through the tears, the entitlement rearing its head one last time. "I'm your son. You're just going to leave me on the street?" The audacity of it nearly took my breath away. "You abandoned me first," I said softly. "You left me in Newark. You uninvited me from your life. You told the world I was dead to you. I am simply respecting your decision. I don't have anywhere to go. You're smart. You're educated. You have a degree from Columbia that I paid for. You got yourself into this situation by making choices. Go make different ones." I stepped back and opened the door wide. "Mom, please." "Goodbye, Wyatt." He stood there for a long moment, cycling through the expressions I knew so well. Anger, pleading, guilt-tripping, looking for the combination that would unlock the old Margot. He was waiting for me to cave. He was waiting for the sacrifice. But the bank was closed. He realized it. His shoulders slumped, and he turned around, walking slowly down the hallway, a broken man in dirty clothes. I watched him go. I watched the back of the son I had worshipped walk away from me. And then, for the first time in 28 years, I closed the door, locked the deadbolt, and chose myself. 4 months after that final, desperate visit, my phone rang on a random Tuesday afternoon. I was shelving books at the Montclair Public Library, a part-time job I had taken not because I needed the money. The GoFundMe and the lawsuit settlement had seen to that, but because I loved the quiet. After decades of the roar of vacuum cleaners and the demands of wealthy employers, I loved the smell of old paper, the hush of the reading room, and the feeling of being useful without being used. Wyatt's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for a long moment, my pulse quickening not with fear, but with a dull, familiar H, the phantom limb pain of a mother who has lost her child. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity, or perhaps the last stubborn vestige of maternal instinct, made me slide the icon to answer. "Mom?" His voice was different, quieter. The frantic desperation of the apartment hallway was gone, replaced by a heavy and hollow exhaustion. It was the voice of a man who had stopped running because he had nowhere left to go. "I'm not calling to ask for anything," he said quickly. "I promise." I didn't speak. I just listened, leaning against a metal card of biographies, guarding my heart like a fortress. "I just wanted you to know I started something," he said, his voice hesitant. "I'm volunteering at a legal aid clinic in Jersey City. It's not prestigious. We help people with eviction notices and debt defense. It's hard work." He paused, and I heard him take a shaky breath on the other end of the line. "But I met a woman there yesterday, a single mom working multiple jobs, trying to keep her kids in school. She was crying because she couldn't afford the filing fees. She reminded me of you." My throat tightened. I gripped the spine of a book, staring at the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. I can't fix what I did to you, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. I know that. I can't undo the wedding or the words or the lawsuit. But I started a small fundraising drive at the clinic for single mothers to help them get resources so they don't have to sacrifice everything the way you did. I named it the Margot Dunlap Initiative. I stood there in the silence of the library. It wasn't a grand building in Alpine. It wasn't a millions of dollars endowment. It was small, gritty, and real. It was the first honest thing he had done in years. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to become the person you thought I was, even if it's too late for us. Thank you for telling me, I said quietly. It was all I could manage. I love you, Mom. I know I don't have the right to say that anymore, but it's true. I love you and I'm sorry. I know, I said, and I did know. I knew that he loved me in whatever broken, selfish way he was capable of. I knew that he was finally, painfully, learning the lesson I had tried to teach him for 28 years. But I also knew that love wasn't always enough to bridge the canyon he had carved between us. I hung up the phone. I didn't call him back. I didn't invite him to dinner. I didn't rush in to rescue him from his guilt or tell him everything was okay. 6 months after the wedding that wasn't, I was still 62 years old, but I was finally free. Free from the belief that love meant destroying yourself for someone else. Free from the guilt that came with setting boundaries. Free from a son who had learned to take because I had never taught him the word no. I started therapy. I reconnected with Geneva and Lorraine, inviting them over for dinners in my new condo, where we laughed and drank wine and didn't talk about our children. They became my real family, the kind built on mutual respect rather than obligation. I went back to the storage unit one afternoon in September. I looked at the bicycle I'd fixed up for Wyatt, the trophies from sports teams I'd paid for with overtime hours, the artwork and essays. I felt something unexpected, not grief. Release. These were artifacts of a relationship that no longer existed. They were evidence of a woman who had disappeared so her son could shine. That woman was gone. I donated most of it to a shelter in Newark. I kept just a few photos for myself, not to torture myself with what I'd lost, but to remember what I'd survived. To remind myself that I was stronger than I'd ever known. People still recognize me sometimes. The article Corinne wrote for the Star Ledger never really went away. It became one of those stories that resurfaces every few months on social media, a viral warning about gratitude and greed. Some strangers stopped me in the grocery store to tell me I should have forgiven Wyatt, that family is family, and that mothers don't give up on their children. I usually just smile and keep walking. They don't understand that I didn't give up. I spent 28 years not giving up. I spent 28 years sacrificing my health, my finances, and my dignity. Closing that door wasn't giving up. It was waking up. At home, I started planting herbs on my balcony in Montclair, basil, rosemary, and thyme, small plants in terracotta pots reaching the sunlight. Every morning, I watered them and watched them grow. These tiny green promises that life continues even after damage leave a light, that you can start over even when you thought everything was destroyed. I realized that true love begins with honoring myself. Closing that door wasn't defeat. It was an act of radical self-respect. I deserve better than to be a stepping stone. And as for Wyatt, I hear he's still in Jersey City. I hear he's still working at the legal clinic, living in a small studio apartment, taking the PATH train to work. I hope he finds his way. I hope he becomes a good man. But he will have to do it without me, because I am busy living the life I finally paid for. You've made it to the end. You walked through the fire with Margot. But I have to be honest, it breaks my heart when I see people listen to these stories, feel these heavy emotions, and then just walk away. No subscription, no support, just silence. It feels like I'm pouring my soul into a void, working days and nights to bring these voices to life, only to be met with ghost viewers. Please, don't be another ghost. If this story kept you company, don't just take it and leave. You owe it to the story to leave a mark. A subscribe, a super thanks, or even just comment in your city. Tell me where in the world you are listening from. Let me know exactly where my voice is traveling so I know I'm not alone in this. And if you aren't ready to leave yet, don't. There are 2 more real-life journeys right here on your screen. Pick one. Stay with me a little longer. Don't let the silence win. Until next time.